Welcome to the Arc Flash number 4. Today, you've got Michael and Silas here talking about post DEF CON Black Hat review. It was a long week in Vegas, Michael. How are you holding up?
Probably better than you because you did the DEF CON weekend. I did not. I was there Monday through Friday, specifically Black Hat. I didn't get to attend any talks, which is unfortunate. I look back on it, I'm like, sort of look forward to mostly show floor stuff. And I know you were busy.
Oh yeah, I I think I got in on Sunday night and I left Monday morning, and then flight delays and all of that
Yeah.
drama. So, but yeah, it was a good week. I caught distantly a couple talks. It was definitely odd DEF CON side with the new headphones they're using for talks. So going into the track one and it being dead silent, it was
Interesting.
it was wild, but it seemed like participants really liked them. It was it was fairly enjoyable, like as working staff as well, and being able to
Yeah.
hear my teammates also as we were coordinating. So it'll be interesting to see if they bring it back next year.
Fantastic. And you like, I guess for everyone else on the call, like you work DEF CON as well, but you also had presentation opportunities throughout the weekend too.
Yeah, so I had two talks this past conference. First one was B-Sides Las Vegas in Josh Corman's I Am the Cavalry track, where talked with Paul Roberts during the talk Operation Grace. Really cool research. Like he and I have been working together for we're going on like 2.5 years. Like I'm the support at the end for uh, both for Paul and Stacy, who have been doing incredible work and looking at some of these end of life devices, and
Mhm.
also like thinking forward, like what should we do in the future that would be better. So I'm a big fan of the idea of when you buy a device, there's an expiration date on it, so you have some sort of rough semblance of an idea. Um, I feel like I shared way too much about my own personal infrastructure in that talk, but it was a good talk. Talked about also some like forever day vulnerabilities.
Yeah, I think like in the specific title there was like it was it around LG televisions? Was that the particular one? The B-Sides LV talk, or this is the particular panel that you were on?
The particular panel. There was also some other stuff
Yeah,
about LG televisions and
yeah.
some good research there. And then also like later that week on Saturday had a panel with DEF CON's Blue Team Village, and that was really fun. Brian Baskin did a fantastic job at moderating us and sort of like keeping the herd of us chickens in line. And then was on the panel with Sydney Marone and Allison G. And the title was fun because it was threat hunting explained badly. So had got a bunch of good hot takes in, and uh, yeah, and it's fun because like it's interesting because threat hunting is one of those we kind of blur the term a lot between like do we mean
Yes.
internal threat hunting or are we talking
Yeah.
like when we're going out in the wild and just looking for trouble, like that's threat hunting, but the space blurs a little bit in terms of what we mean with our communication.
I agree, and I agree on that. Especially when who you're discussing with, like if you're discussing it broadly, like it's going to have usually the connotation of like I'm exploiting my internal log set data looking for threats at evaded detection.
Yep.
Um, yeah, versus I'm out on the internet looking for weird and crazy stuff. Um, on that note, like for me, I'll give my observations at Black Hat in general because I didn't attend any of the talks, unfortunately. But it seemed like overall like less people. Hard to say why. Maybe less international travelers overall too. Or maybe I dare I say the commercialization of Black Hat, where Black Hat now feels like what RSA used to be. But even in this case, like there was some heavy hitters that didn't have a show floor presence this year. I think, namely, CrowdStrike and Palo. I didn't see those booths, although I did see presence there, at least from Palo, with a like a VIP area. I'm one, and then a number of companies I'd never heard of with these massive booths, and it was really hard to determine, at least from walking around, what the primary differentiation was between all the AI buzzword companies. A bolt on to Claude or OpenAI, or are you doing something actually really unique in the space, training your own models, fine tuning models, implementing open weight models, et cetera, et cetera? Really difficult to tell, especially in the whole section with the AI pen testing, et cetera. Really hard to tell in differentiation. AI socks really hard to tell in differentiation as well. So I don't know if you have any sort of feelings in that regard.
I come from those old sysadmin backgrounds on these things. I love it, especially when I see companies building towards the stability side with open weight models and a product that's not going to be dependent on Claude's guardrails every week. But
Yeah.
But it was a huge topic this year, and like it's incredible seeing how the space is adopting to it as well.
Agreed. I mean, even on our end, how we see how we're utilizing the tools on an everyday basis, and where we hit guardrails and want to go to open weight models, and yeah, that's like weekly changes, which is difficult to keep on top of, and I guess for organizations to also develop solutions on top of. Like if you're developing, this is one of my sort of my primary pet peeves right now, is organizations that are developing solutions on top of frontier models from one of the large frontier model companies, which is like, one, you new guardrails could just come into play at any one time, break everything.
Yep.
And like that seems bad. And then also you have to think about model obsolescence, which is, hey, we built a solution on top of Opus 4.6, and Opus 4.6 goes end of life. At some point, it's going to go away, and it might not work on 4.8 or 5. That solution because of guardrails or some other implementation. And so I think in those cases, it's like, yes, like in order to survive that, like there has to be that research and development effort into exploring a number of open weight models that may fulfill that need for you for that particular workflow.
Yep. And also having the continuous testing as well to know that, like, if you are dependent on an older model, having the testing in place for newer models, just to ensure that you're going to still get the same results when things change.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, again, like it's going to be crazy to see next year, and who survives, who's there. I think there's definitely going to be market consolidation, or just evaporation for that matter. It's like, yeah, that just didn't work. So I guess we'll see next year what Black Hat DEF CON looks like. But it overall feels like like this whole thing is growing up.
Yes.
More commercialization of Black Hat, more commercialization of DEF CON, besides Las Vegas, more so as well. Does that create more opportunity for other conferences to sort of pop up, like we're seeing? I'll give Unprompted Con a plug here. I think with the October is the next conference, right? Unprompted.
Very end of October. Yep.
Somewhere around there. CFP's open. But right, it's like, okay, conference starts up specifically around AI, and it's like taking off, right? Is that sort of the next place where all the practitioners get together and share the war stories. TBD. I think so far everyone's amazing. But I guess we'll see there.
Yeah, I mean, content also was fantastic at both conferences as well.
Yeah,
I figure that's the next area we should dive into.
Yeah. Let's talk about the content.
So I know at least big thing for me was a lot of the like DPRK stories that came out, because there was one big one that came out from DEF CON, it seemed like, and one big one that came out from Black Hat. So on the Black Hat side, there was the I'm trying to remember who it was. It was it Styk or STYK is the author of it?
Styk is, I think. I'll look it up. You go on.
Yeah, so they love seeing these stories about threat actor C2 infiltration and what people are able to find when they end up sitting within the same visibility space as the threat actor. 1,600 companies, it looks like, that they found as well that had been compromised. So really interesting seeing the scope of some of these campaigns. And I know that at least for the contagious interview stuff, that's been a topic that we've been watching very closely for the better part of the past year. Like there are a lot of overlaps. There's some critical differences with Beavertail, but at least from like what we're still scanning, like we're seeing a lot of similar infrastructure and beyond. Yeah,
I think one, if we pull this back into sort of census perspective and just sort of TLDR for everyone on the webinar today that doesn't know, it's like what's going on in DPRK land, contagious interview, which is basically, DPRK actors, so residents, etc., that are part of our program that are trying to get jobs with, North American or European security IT companies. So they're just posing as someone else. But in this particular case, they could be bringing kit with them, in a particular interview process. It's like, hey, we're going to work on this coding interview and distribute malware that way as well. So it's not just like a social engineering threat that ends up being a person that works for you now, right? Your organization gets instrumented officially, unofficially through this process. So from the I think the census side, so like some of the interesting things that we see is like we have really good detection for a lot of IP KVMs, and we can see laptop farms, etc. That look super interesting.
Oh yeah, and I mean GLINet has several new models of their IP KVM coming out, and they look really cool in general. So
Yeah,
I
not to mention that tech is super cool. Like I'm checking out a few of them. Like these are neat.
like
I don't know. I guess if I ran a bunch of remote laptop farms, it'd be really really cool.
yeah, I mean I use quite a few KVMs in general. Like I have two on my desk and down on my server rack. There's an 8 port, and having something that was IP based would be really nice. One of the kind of like details I suspect might have gotten lost though from a lot of the discussions this week was it was interesting hearing Todd Hemmen, the Deputy Assistant Director for FBI's Cyber Capabilities Branch, uh, make a side comment during one of his panels about potentially having accidentally hired a North Korean IT worker as part of the federal workforce. And so I'm hoping we get some more details about that, because I think I joked about it several years ago that like how long is it going to be until U.S. government hires somebody off Fiverr? But it sounds like we've kind of hit that point.
Perhaps until I get some further detail there.
Yeah.
It sounds like you just mentioned in a side comment. I mean, I've seen a number of this, like the general scams.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, air quote scams, because I'm going to say whether it's DPRK or whatnot, but exceptionally prevalent across the board. So it puts it. There's some large pressures. And we're working with recruiting specifically when we're investigating, potential DPRK resumes, but just in general, it's just like there's a whole bunch of criminal opportunity there. Fake resumes, LinkedIn profiles that get recycled, malware-laden resumes. These different scams that get perpetrated. I mean, that is a weak underbelly, and it's difficult to communicate all the different threats that exist, or your
Mm-hmm.
social engineering threats, your malware threats, especially in most orgs where recruiting is already underwater with AI generated resumes. Like that's like a whole nother issue, which is all this noise is coming.
Oh yeah, I talked to a few folks on the floor at DEF CON as well that were having trouble both on the like trying to be hired side, but also on the recruiting side, because with a lot of those tools as well, they will tune resumes specifically
Mm-hmm.
towards what are in the job requirements, and so some candidates will be absolutely flawless on paper, but when you get to an interview and you're like, all right, tell me about MSO 8067,
Yeah.
it's Greek.
Yeah, roger that. I see those as a hiring manager. I see those. I'm like, this looks perfect. I'm like, yeah, it's a specific resume to my job posting. I was like,
So,
yeah, but then think about in those cases, it's a document, is a lure, right? It's just to get that discussion going, and then, hey, check out my GitHub repo and clone my repo and do a thing, or check out my Maldoc. Then it's off to the races from there.
oh yeah.
Super
So we
interesting.
all,
So go
yep.
ahead.
Yeah, so we had a lot of public content we published as Census before the conference as well, and
Yeah.
to dive into it. So one of the ones that I'll dive in straight to that I was really excited about was Allison Martinez published a blog that looked pretty deeply into Mirai. I've been following Mirai for years, and this was incredible getting to see some fresh research on it, because I think most folks may remember Mirai from back in 2016 with the DDoS against Dyn, which took
Mm-hmm.
out Netflix, PlayStation, and a quarter of the internet for a few hours. But Mirai still continues to this day, and not just the dead bots that will forever be echoing for a control server that's not there, but we still see live instances running the original protocol as well. So that was a really interesting thing to see kick off.
Yeah, for those on the show, Allison was there as a summer intern. She's an undergrad at Georgia Tech. Yeah, fantastic piece of research there. I think one of the things, and this is thematic, like we've been talking about this a lot, and this sort of is going to broach a few topics that we'll talk about here. Mirai, however you want to pronounce it, took advantage of unsecure, vulnerable IoT devices. How many times have we talked about that specific thing in the last 10 years in perpetuity?
Yep.
And I guess this is one of the reasons why Mirai is prevalent, or Mirai variants are prevalent, because there seems to be this unending supply of vulnerable IoT devices. And everyone's like, what do we do about it? I mean, you had a panel about it, like end of life
Yep.
devices. And then my argument is I don't think it really matters. End of life doesn't matter if, like, when the thing is released, no one's ever going to patch it in the first place. So who cares about end of life? It's just there, and we see that with things like Mirai, where that like new vulns and new default passwords and all that'll get integrated into a new bot variant, and then sort of off to the races from there. But all that old stuff is still there.
Yeah. I mean, it is also fascinating because one of the things I touched on in the panel as well was in some cases, when we're able to get a good idea for what the total volume is, that essentially is a fairly accurate attack surface mapping of the sort of state of that vulnerable ecosystem. And like
Mm.
we've seen the exploitation of Mirai forks that go after GPON routers, and you end up with a fairly well enumerated subset of the internet that's just those devices.
Interesting. Do you think there's any, or do you gather that there's any motivation to somehow holistically, at least in certain regions, identify those, like attribute those things, like, hey, like this IP address is this person, you need to take this stuff offline, or work with ISPs to filter that data?
I mean, there have been some really good efforts in the past where when there are like takedowns of the control server infrastructure, sinkholing by law enforcement, and then creating a list, then working with the carriers has done some good work at shutting things down. I
Yeah.
know I've gotten a couple of alerts from Comcast back when I used to have Comcast as my home internet provider uh, because I was running a number of different Mirai bots out of my basement, checking the C2 servers, and they were like, "Hey,
Mm.
we think you have a problem." But
This is interesting because this parallels like the next topic that I want to talk about is right a lot of hubbub communication around Iranian threat actors targeting OT networks
yes,
for exploiting PLCs connected to the internet. And I say hubbub because attribution in this case is left to the government. There's been no private entities been able to make attribution, and then there's also really no attribution information shared out to the private sector for the private sector to do attribution. So you someone just points at Iran. It's Iran. I don't know. But what I can say at the end of the day is that Census has had for the last number of years has had visibility and reported on PLCs, industrial control system protocols directly exposed to the internet. Modbus is the biggest offender. There's some challenges on the Modbus side, but overall, it's like this stuff is there. It's relatively left in an unsecure state, meaning that anyone with internet access can, in a lot of cases, view HMIs,
mm-hmm.
can directly connect to one of these protocols via authorized software that you can go download and acquire. Its credentials are the same. So, from a capability standpoint, there's really nothing in that overview that like that I would say like that's a sophisticated Iranian threat actor that can pull that off.
Yes, and it's also interesting because like we've seen like for months it feels like we've seen like weak attempts at disruptions or defacements, things that are not going to have that have the potential to cause severe disruption, not by intention, like an intentional move, but by
Mm.
poking around the systems as aggressively as some of those folks have. There's been the concern, but those aren't really good signs of sophistication.
I think the lone exception being this latest activity that was first reported in my home state of Minnesota on values actually being changed or configurations being eliminated that caused water pressure issues, and then boil water advisories came as a result.
Yep. And also the scale of that as well, I would say is one of the first early signs of some good sophistication as tied to this campaign. Because if there's multiple states that were impacted as well, and there was a
Yeah.
coordinating effort, that's sophistication as I see it.
Here's the challenging part of my end, or at least the challenging part that I identify, and I want to call this out a lot. The majority of the ICS protocols we see on the internet today, this includes PLCs, everything under the umbrella, is on a mobile network. I think like 70% is on Verizon Wireless. There's 10% on AT&T, and then it sort of goes from there. Geolocation on cellular modems is not good. It's really not good. It's not accurate. So there's really no mechanism to say I want to go target everything in the state of Minnesota. You're going to get lucky. So I think in this particular case, so it's even with our data, when I think our data is the most accurate available today. I don't see another data going to another data source that's going to say all of these are in these geolocations in Minnesota. And there's some caveats there, which is like there potentially could be an SNMP service that has contact information, or right, we've seen a VNC is open, or there's an HMI and it has a picture of the water tower with the address. But I'm saying that's like we had examples in the dozens compared to the hundreds of thousands of water systems that are online in some capacity. So from a targeting perspective, it was like North America works. Outside of that, it's really spray and pray. So it's identify standard ports. These are the things that are there. That makes the most amount of sense, and then we can spray across them.
This is fascinating because I see a similar problem occurring for threat actors. I saw it a lot with the Conti leaks when those happened, because from some of the TrickBot panels, like clearly they had large volume of access to places, but even with access, the next job is then identification. If you've got something like a solid domain that's tied to like a system, and you can say, okay, this is workstation01.silascutler.com, great. That's going to save a lot of time on attribution. But for a lot of them, operators are diving in there, and sometimes what people are seeing as dwell time is actually just threat actors trying to figure out, like, what system am I on? Am I on grandma's computer, or am I on the receptionist's computer at a multinational company?
Yeah. So in this case, it's like the Iranian PLC actors like really don't know what sort of the TTPs were behind that, and some of the data that might have indicated that the actors knew where they were and knew what they were doing, or just doing some sort of mass exploitation. But I do find that inherently interesting, because there is, like, if we were to say like, hey, take this stuff off the internet, or hey, put a VPN, 2FA in front of it. Like there was just a recently released Polish CERT report about an attack right on their OT environment for, I think it was a wind farm.
Yep.
And great report, loved reading it. A lot of the recommendations that the industry would have to secure these networks were in place. And I get it, like, it's kind of funny because I called this out a few times in a few different presentations. It's like, these recommendations are not a panacea for like everything, especially when you throw a Fortinet device in front. So the vulns and the cred loss and all that stuff. And it turns out in this Polish CERT report, the Fortinet was the problem.
Yes. And that became the weak point that allowed them to get in.
Right. But even in this case, it's like, yeah, but now we get to explore, like, this network seemed to be well designed, right? Or these were recommendations that I would propagate throughout industry here, but now we have a sort of a case example of how maybe more sophisticated threat actor came in and sort of rooted around in this network as well. So more lessons learned there.
And this is definitely, because I know there were, I think, 3 wipers that were also disclosed in that report as well. Like, this is a report that we're going to need a bit of time to digest as well, because there's a lot of deep links in this, and I'm always very interested when we start to see actual devices start to get really start to be wiped by hostile software.
Yeah, I think the wipe is the problem. The wipe is going to be impactful to operations no matter where it's deployed. It's more so than like, hey, we deleted a configuration in the PLC. Most of those configurations generally are backed up. When you start wiping the control systems or the workstations, and that's generally more impactful. Depending on the type of environment it is, if it's a remote environment too, getting people out to that site to restore capability can be more difficult. I like to call it as well as that, like, generally where you see these OT protocols, you see other associated protocols on that IP address. Then there's a lot of VNC, there's SMB, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that can be exploited. But right, where there's VNC, there's a workstation. Where there's a workstation, there's a network. Where there's a network, there's a bunch of other stuff that's connected. It's just not that OT protocol that's the most concerning.
Oh yeah, it gives away the whole shop based on what's being publicly exposed. And I mean, this report has big sandworm vibes, so there's a lot to dig into. And we saw device destruction back in 2016, 2017. If anybody has any of those devices, DM. I'm very interested.
Fantastic.
I think we're at about time at this point, so
exactly.
Yeah, we can switch to taking any questions if folks have questions. Otherwise, I think we're pretty near the end for today.
Yeah, I'll do a quick plug for our State of the Internet report. I did brief that quite a bit during Black Hat this week. We do have a teaser blog that's out. You can register to get the full version, which is due in the first weeks of October. We're just putting the finishing touches here on the analysis. I'll probably do it for another couple weeks, looking at a whole bunch of threat trend analysis of all the threats that we tracked today. I think we have over 200 in the corpus. We'll see how it shakes out over the course of, I think, doing a look back a little over a year. So that should be pretty interesting when that comes out.
Super cool. I'm really excited to see how that turns out. And
Yeah,
it's getting close to being done. So
all right.
we'll see y'all next month.
Take care, everyone.
Cheers.